San Junipero is perhaps the most unique of the Black Mirror episodes in that it doesn't quite leave you feeling as depressed about the future as previous ones have. Given the pessimistic nature of the show, it was fairly surprising to watch this calm and beautiful tale unfold. Not to mention that 3 of the most terrific and haunting episodes the show has ever produced preceded this one. This episode deals with many topics, including sexuality, immortality, and virtual reality. During the writing process, Brooker had been interested in nostalgia therapy for the elderly and its effects on those suffering from memory loss diseases such as Alzheimer's. The strength of the tale lies not perhaps in the typical shocking or disturbing nature of the show, but more in a well-written story and a carefully selected soundtrack. This isn't to say that neither of these elements show up in previous episodes, but these are the 2 elements that I will be focusing on in this analysis. I hope you enjoy. The opening of the tale only reveals one thing to us. We are in the 1980s. 1987 to be exact, which is the year that the majority of the songs in the soundtrack were released. An example of nostalgia therapy is playing music from previous time periods to allow elderly people to reminisce times of normalcy and familiarity. Heaven is a Place on Earth, performed by Belinda Carlisle, is the first and last song of the episode, and is played at the beginning to set the stage for the notion of a period piece, allowing us to believe that the story is taking place in 1987. This is also reflected by the costumes, hairstyles, cars, the radio announcement, and other aesthetic choices. The nervous expression of Yorkie reflects the discomfort the viewer may feel given that this is the first episode not to be set in the present or future. Of course, this isn't actually the past, but nonetheless, a first-time viewer would assume that the episode is in fact set in the past. Yorkie follows Kelly into Tucker's bar. Interestingly, the name of the company that hosts the San Junipero program is an abbreviation of Tucker's, and is plastered all over the robots and in front of the building. On initial viewing, one would again assume the use of the song C'est la vie is just there to set up the atmosphere of the 80s, but is played here to encourage visitors not to worry about their limited and boring lives. In fact, the translation of the song's title is somewhere close to That's Life. As she proceeds to the arcade machines, she is invited by Davis to play a game called Top Speed, in which she reacts with alarm at the car crashing. This foreshadows the reveal of being involved in a car accident after being disowned by her homophobic family. I do wonder if the decision to name the protagonist Yorkie has anything to do with the chocolate bar. I'm assuming they didn't for product placement reasons, but their catchphrase was for a while not for girls, which also connects to the homophobia she faced before her accident.
I feel like I'm being analyzed.
Ah shit, caught in the act. Anyway, they begin dancing, which is where things start to get interesting. Aside from the fact Yorkie hasn't moved like this in decades, it's interesting how traumatized and nervous she becomes when she begins dancing, simultaneously being surrounded by beautiful women. Given her repressed sexual desires as well, this moment is quite impactful. The song Fake that's played here creates a deeper connotation, in that it also exposes Kelly's promiscuous nature. Presumably, Yorkie is falling in love with her at this moment, but the music is warning her of how Kelly is likely to change her identity physically, shown through the use of costume later, and emotionally, in that commitment is something she simply cannot do after spending decades with her husband. In fact, Kelly's rejection of Wes is shown at first, and she would later do the same to Yorkie. Those that have already passed over probably are relieved to be rid of their commitments and anxieties, whereas Yorkie never had any for the majority of her life. This scares her, and she runs out into the rain. After Yorkie's chat with Kelly in the rain, she decides to give the whole thing another try, but this time dressing to impress. Our first outfit consists of her previous clothing, with Girlfriend in a Coma playing underneath, only to be interrupted by the hard, bitter truth that she wants to be Kelly's girlfriend in a coma. She switches the tape to Don't You Forget About Me, and she is seen dressed up in more playful feminine attire, only to realize that by dressing up in an ordinary way, Kelly is more likely to forget about her. Tape gets switched again to Heart and Soul by T'Pau, and she's seen in a much sexier outfit, perhaps a little over-prepared for the notion of losing her virginity. She hears the lyrics about giving a bit of heart and soul and realizes that's what's lacking from her outfit. The semi-final outfit appears much more professional and mysterious to make a handsome impression on Kelly. However, Addicted to Love begins to play and suggests she's trying too hard and should just relax a little. The final track of this section then plays, Wishing Well by Terence Trent D'Arby. The meaning behind this one I think is a little bit harder to narrow down, but I think it was placed here when considering that the song stops on the line, Wish me love, a wishing well to kiss and tell, a wishing well of crocodile cheers, when Kelly steps out of the car. Interestingly, the use of crocodile cheers here once again warns us of Kelly's insincerity towards Yorkie. Our 2 main characters then return to Tucker's and the song Living in a Box by the band Living in a Box from their debut album called Living in a Box starts playing. Although it's pretty mundane and repetitive, the song reflects the fact that all these people are now living inside a box that is their afterlife. The naive young man who is now chatting up Kelly says that he never understood this song. Perhaps he's been in there for so long he can't remember why he's in there in the first place. The song then changes again to Need You Tonight by INXS? Inxus? In excess? Anyway, the song's lyrics parallel the notion of only having this night to enjoy yourself and the company of the living before they all get banned from the server for a week. It's quite neat that the music begins to fade after the line, "The 21st century's yesterday," given that any notion of time is completely eradicated in San Junipero. Kelly then brings Yorkie back to her place and they start doing it. It then cuts to waves crashing, and I think we all know what this symbolizes. After some gushing, we are teased into the subtext of regret that's laid heavily throughout the story. By this time, most first-timers will be pretty confused about two young women talking like they were far older than they look, but of course a second-time viewing will do the trick to understanding this dialogue. Kelly spent all her time being dedicated to one person, and never acted unfaithfully ever. The idea that she can spend all her time being free of such restrictions must be difficult to grapple with, given how liberating the experience must be while simultaneously feeling guilty about her dead husband. Yorkie then looks for Kelly in the quagmire, which is full-on Pleasure Island. As she makes her way through the club, it's intriguing that a woman with a snake is there, referencing the fall to temptation Adam and Eve face in Genesis. During this segment, Something Against You by the Pixies is heard playing. Notably, this song isn't from 1987, but the quagmire doesn't appear to be one of those places that changes with the time period. One would assume that element of the simulation is exclusive to the town, not in some shack on the outskirts. Yorkie then finds Wes, resentful of Kelly and how he can no longer get his dicky sticky with her. The lyrics of the song are pretty self-explanatory, but I think the fact the final line is "I am one happy prick" serves to show how he just doesn't give a shit about how much of a moron he must look, because he has all the pleasure he could ever want in here instead. Still continuing her search, the first time change occurs, to 1980. Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and the sound of Funky Town playing are dominant factors that prove this, but before we're allowed to take another breath, we're here in 1996 with the sound of Alanis Morissette's Ironic playing in the background. I honestly don't think there's any deeper meaning behind placing this specific song here, not to mention it's only played for about 10 seconds and then we jump to 2002 almost instantly afterwards. Upon doing this, Can't Get You Out of My Head by Kylie Minogue begins to play. This song's use toys with the fact that they are all literally inside each other's heads. Even as Kelly walks away from Yorkie, you hear the line "Won't you stay?" to add emotional impact to this particular moment in the scene. Funnily enough as well, Yorkie's desire for Kelly to stay forever and ever later in the episode are foreshadowed by the chorus of this song. It would be interesting to know, that is if we assume that Black Mirror is set in a shared universe, how does this add up with White Christmas and the cookies? After our protagonist's bitch fight in the bathroom, Kelly punches the mirror, and in a stunning edit right here, no damage is sustained despite the image of the cracked mirror going from visible to invisible. This sharp reminder that her experience is purely simulated reminds her that she has a very small amount of time left to live. They wind up on the rooftop and they talk about the percentage of people that no longer possess human bodies and yet continue to live their existence inside this simulation. As Kelly argues later, this certainly is comparable to a graveyard, but such notions are irrelevant given that any individual in here can exist potentially forever. It really is a fascinating episode due to it giving away so little of the rules of the simulation because it's so hyper-realistic it doesn't appear to need them. Having said that, after more glorious gushing, Kelly finds another flaw in the machinery, the cigarettes tasting empty. These doubts assist the lead up to her outbreak after they get married, in that Yorkie can look past the problems of the new world and insist on the system being perfect, heaven in fact. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Their conversation about meeting up in real life is very heartfelt, given that this is the part where they converse and also look the most elderly. It is at this point, exactly 2/3 of the way into the episode, that we see reality for the first time, and the pieces all start falling into place. The girlfriend in a coma is finally revealed and feels like one of these odd, you looked different in your profile picture hookups you can imagine playing out in Catfish or something. But here, there's no shame. In fact, it's quite beautiful really that Kelly still finds affection to give to Yorkie despite her condition. The fact that the episode focused purely on their relationship across time beforehand gets us to sympathize with these characters, but also confuses the audience as to who is truly the main character. Initially, it would seem that Yorkie is the main character, as she is the shy and lonely one chasing love that she never had. It's here in reality that Kelly is put under the spotlight, as she then chases Yorkie, only to find the answers to the questions that were left unanswered right in front of her. I find it fascinating when the fiancé talks about the government putting in place a time limit for the living so they don't kill themselves just to get into the simulation. I guess it's understandable to put such restrictions in place, but it would be interesting to know if such therapy would actually stop people from killing themselves in the first place. The point remains, however, that simulations as near perfect as this one could have a detrimental effect on human life as we know it. If everyone's busy living inside a simulation, who's going to fill the job positions? Perhaps as technology advances, we would hand over all the jobs to computers so that it won't matter if we're all plugged into virtual reality. Don't think this is just a minor point, however. AI-driven cars are just around the corner. It is a very real problem that will need solving one way or another. On the other hand, would we as people be so quick as to hand over our autonomy to machines just so we can pretend we're invincible? Who knows? It's really great to speculate about the future of virtual reality, given it's still in a relatively infant stage and has the potential to be a complete game changer. The design of the device that places our characters inside the simulation kind of reminds me of a medicine tablet that you'd pop into a glass of water, adding to the theme of therapy, as if these little devices are making sufferable lives a bit better. Following the marriage ceremony, we see those gorgeous shots of gulls flying above the sea. Yorkie sits and takes a deep breath of air, placing her glasses beside her. This imagery indicates her freedom from her physical restrictions. She can now breathe without the aid of a machine, and she no longer needs a pair of glasses to comfort her from the trauma she experienced. Kelly then takes her for a romantic wedding drive, only for things to take a turn the moment Yorkie reflects the addictive nature of the machine, essentially telling Kelly to die. Yorkie insists on San Junipero being real, but it is Kelly who has witnessed firsthand the flaws in the mechanics of it, and that it is not a completely authentic replication of reality. Despite having eternity to wait for Kelly, she can't stand the idea of waiting a week for her mortal wife. Kelly also understands the levels of work people place into their lives, and that eternity in a fake reality has no value system in place for people to find reason to carry on. To her, suffering and sacrifice gives life meaning, and without that, she feels it would be an insult to her family's memory by taking advantage of an afterlife that they never got the chance to have. In a burst of outrage, she drives herself into a barrier that would ordinarily kill her, but the miracle of life is preserved within the machine. It is in this moment where Yorkie tries to pick her up that midnight strikes, and Kelly realizes that her end point in life really is creeping up on her every day. The next life will be a far more exciting and different one to the miserable and finite existence she led as a mortal. After Kelly makes the final decision of her existence, Heaven is a Place on Earth begins to play again. After consuming all the information of the episode, the song is given a whole new context, in that heaven and a continued simulated existence does actually take place in a giant computer lab on Earth. The lyrics, "In heaven love comes first," reflects Kelly's notion that love is waiting for her in the afterlife, as if this is the main priority of the simulation. Even though we see Kelly passing on and her coffin being lowered into her grave, the upbeat and cheerful music makes her death something to be celebrated, unlike the solemn organ music we commonly associate with death. Notice how Kelly's name is in white and not in the faded grey of her dead relatives. Of course, one could say this is just because it's been newly added to the gravestone, but to me the colour symbolises her entrance to heaven, unlike her relatives whose experience will remain a mystery for the rest of time. The lyrics, "In this world we're just beginning to understand the miracle of living," resolves Kelly's doubts of becoming eternal, in that it really is a miracle that she gets a second chance. Thanks for watching. Apologies for my sore throat. Unfortunately, these things can't be helped. Once I'm finished with a script, I just simply have to record it. Do you think this type of virtual reality could exist in the 21st century? Comment below, where we will continue this discussion.